las că o să-ți facă măta casa asta așa frumoasă.
You have the river that kind of watches silently as well. And sometimes I wanted for the viewer to be confused on what they're actually seeing. Absolutely. I think the hybridity aspect comes more from the process of development that is prior to the actual writing of the film. And what I mean by that is that basically the story gets informed by the stories of the people that I meet and the communities that I actually, immerse myself in. And afterwards, even when the script is written, that sort of a bounce comes back at the fiction, and reality continuously changes it and polishes it and rearranges it in ways that I think does touch the aspect of hybridity. And I think as well, there are moments in which, you make this, you create this frame in which this non-professional actors both, play somebody else, but at the same time, kind of put themselves in as well. So that's maybe again another aspect of this. It was quite a lot of room before the actual shoot, because the way I usually work is that I do have a script, right? But when I go into rehearsals with the actors, for example, we rehearse a scene, but I try not to use as much as I can the actual text. I write things like around the story that could be of help and could help that sequence grow. And I ask them, knowing, what the objective of the sequence is, what are the stakes in it, how does the character feel, what is the dynamics in between him and another character, knowing all of this, I basically create a framework in which I invite them to improvise. And afterwards, that always gets, shots, and afterwards I look at what I've shot and I go back into the writing, so the writing gets again changed by that improvisation. And when we reach the actual stage of shooting the film, there's not much room anymore, because I know how stressful that period actually is. And then, those, 12 hours in which you need to be as sharp as you can. And I'm not at that stage in my career in which I feel that I could be as spontaneous as I would like to, and at the same time be able to respect the norms of that schedule. The starting point was myself. And what I mean by that is that I was 27 when I started this project, and I was really in a stage in which I was trying to understand a bit of how I operate and who I am, and how I can define myself in my sense of self, at least. And in order to be able to do that, I had to kind of come back to my place of origins, which was the rural South. So it was both a personal challenge to do this research and to plunge into that, but at the same time, it was a challenge to start working on my first long film, on my first feature film. So it started from that. And that position, as I was mentioning to somebody else earlier on, was a very contradictory one, because at the same time I was coming from that world. I had run away from it. But then whenever somebody would say anything bad about it, I would defend it. And then, so I thought, okay, then I have this responsibility of trying to understand better from my position now, how do I relate with it? You're right. I think, unfortunately, we don't see many characters like that on the main, center stage. And I think one of the reasons is because they're not instantly likable. And unfortunately, I think we work in an industry that kind of has imposed a bit this need for making characters sympathetic. But I think that's also a very comfortable zone, because I don't think in our usual lives we relate like that with people. I think we can be very unsympathetic sometimes, and very, and I think in a way, it's an exercise for the viewer to look carefully, to be present, and to try to understand how this woman functions. Hopefully that by the end, they gain a sense of empathy with her. And that was one of my stakes, to show somebody that's not easy to like. You don't easily fall in love with her. But as you learn to understand why she is the way she is, you end up at the ground zero of saying, that's another human being and we're all fallible. And I can fall in love with her, actually. Yeah, it was something quite, during my first visit, when I started the research, one of the homes in which I stayed for a couple of days was that of a mixed family, Roma and non-Roma. And that was the first time when I actually saw that kind of family. And I realized, wow, but it's amazing. I mean, anyway, they were an amazing family, but the fact that I hadn't been exposed to it was the thing that I found to be quite bizarre. And then I thought it would make a lot of sense, actually, to introduce that as, an important aspect in the film. And then to deal with these questions of racism, but not, to make them to present them in a dogmatic way, or to try to, but rather to actually look at them in a nuanced kind of. Well, the location, we looked for months and months for a place that would be like that. And then when we discovered this lake, actually, it's a lake that comes from the river, myself and the producer, Gabi, we just knew that that's going to be the spot. Problem was that the two houses that we were visiting there weren't proper for the actual shoot. So therefore, because we have a very kind friend who's also a director and works in construction, he helped us basically to be able to build the house. I knew that I wanted this film basically not to look like a documentary. So I knew I wanted to put the filter of cinema on it somehow. And that, I'm in love with images. That's why I do what I do. I'm more in love with images than I am with stories. So I think it was very important to find those images along with Laurențiu, the cinematographer I worked with, and the aesthetic, in order to convey an atmosphere, a feeling, something that just goes beyond what's being told in between, even in between the lines. So yeah, I think it was highly important to keep a bit, this lyrical aspect that is something very dear to me in the films that I do, to keep it in this feature as well, and to be able to create a sort of a grammar of the visual language as well. You see, I think it's very much about the way we look at what happens to us, this film. Nature is there to look silently, unjudgmental at the lives of these two people and of all the others that surround them. You have the river that kind of watches silently as well. And it's us who watch other people who are being watched. It's also animals who look at us who look at them. Animals are quite present in the film as well. So I would say that in the beginning of the film, in that montage, what I was trying to do, I was trying to basically, I was trying to break the boundaries in between what's human and what's not human. Because what you see there, actually, it's a mix of textures coming both from human beings and from animals.
Yes.
And sometimes I wanted for the viewer to be confused on what they're actually seeing, whether it's, because I guess what I'm trying to, what I understood by doing with this film was that life is tough. but it does go on. And I think, as cliche as this is, it is also very true. And I think kind of nature sometimes acts as a very good counterpoint to that. And therefore, if cinema is not about a gaze, I don't know about what else it is, but in a sense, yeah, you see those eyes that continuously come up in the montage up until the moment we see the flashlights of the car. That happened because we have a common friend. Alexandra introduced us. She had read the script of the film and sent it to Sebastian, who was at that point very willing to start basically nurturing his relationship with Romanian cinema and wanted to support young talents here. Yes, I've started already as I was finishing this last film, which is the first feature. I was started working on the second and the third. So at this point, I'm in a more advanced kind of stage with the second film. It's part of a trilogy on love in the rural side. Yeah.
Follow up to the first.
Yeah, but you see, it's more thematically, it is not connected story-wise. So if the first film is about the relationship in between, the love in between a mother and her son, the second one is about romantic love, and the last one, the third one, is about self-love. Mm-hmm. So all of this in a setting that is, either fully the rural or partially there.